Well, listen, unfortunately, the left, when it comes to abortion, has gotten more and more radical. And you see that from the questioning of Justice Sotomayor, where she is suggesting that to protect a life is somehow taking a religious view. For most of human history, life has been protected. And if you look at where the court really started to go wrong, the 1973 decision of Roe versus Wade started the Supreme Court down this very dangerous road of being deeply, deeply politicized. What the justices said in Roe is you silly voters, you don't have a right to make any decisions regulating abortion. It doesn't matter that what you may vote to do, what your citizens vote to do. We 9 unelected judges are going to decree the rules for you. And that decision, more than any decision in modern times, has produced enormous division in our country. Now, I am hopeful, and I think there's some reason to be optimistic, that the result of today's argument will be the court finally admitting that was a mistake, overruling Roe, which is the right thing to do. It's what I've urged the court to do, and returning that decision to the state legislatures.
Well, Senator, if we have 6 Republican appointees on this court, after all the money that's been raised, the Federalist Society, all these big fat cat dinners, I'm sorry, I'm pissed about this. If this court with 6 justices cannot do the right thing here, the constitutional thing, then I think it's time to do what Robert Bork said we should do, which is to circumscribe the jurisdiction of this court. And they want to blow it up, then that's the way to change things finally. Because this can't stand. This is insane.
I would do that in a heartbeat. As you know, the Constitution gives Congress the authority to restrict the jurisdiction of the court. I think we should do that.
Absolutely.
You know, it is something sad looking at this court. And as you guys were going through counting noses, there are only 2 justices that I am confident how they're going to vote on overruling Roe, and that's Justice Thomas and Justice Alito. Now, I'm hopeful we get to 5, but I am not at all certain, and that's really unfortunate. And you know, you mentioned a minute ago the book I wrote last fall, One Vote Away. There's an entire chapter in the book talking about life and walking through the history, starting with Roe versus Wade, the decision-making, the politicization that came from it, and also talking about the 3 most recent Supreme Court justices. And we'll see how they vote, but there's reason at least to be concerned. I hope that they do not disappoint so many of us that had put our faith that they will follow the law, because there's a right outcome here, and that is to follow the law and overturn Roe, which the result of that, and this is something a lot of people misunderstand, if and when Roe is overturned, it doesn't mean that suddenly abortion is illegal. It means the state legislatures can decide what the rules are. And some states, look, California is going to continue to have wildly permissive abortion laws. There are other states that are going to decide to protect life and protect it far more vigorously.
Yeah, Justice
and
Scalia
it leaves
said
it to the democratic process.
Senator Hawley made that point, and that's absolutely correct. Now, your friend, Texas Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, she used the Roe arguments to attack Texas's abortion restrictions. Watch.
It's a health crisis that's going on in Texas. It's a travesty. It is a state full of sadness, and it has women fleeing. The actual crisis takes me back, Kristen, to the bounty hunters of slaves who were attempting to free themselves out of the bondage of slavery. We're literally living in the 1800s.
Now, babies are bondage. Senator, your response.
You know, that's a sad and extreme argument. And I got to say, today's Democratic Party, you know, it wasn't that long ago when Bill Clinton was president and where he said he wanted abortion to be safe, legal, and rare. Now, I disagreed with him on that, but he at least was proposing some degree of moderation. Today's Democratic Party, the position of virtually every Democrat in Congress, is they support unlimited abortion on demand up until the moment of birth. They support partial birth abortion with government funding, with no parental notification, no parental consent. That is a radical and extreme position supported by fewer than 10% of Americans. And it's the position of Joe Biden, of Kamala Harris, of Chuck Schumer, of Nancy Pelosi. The Democratic Party has gotten extreme on this. And you know, it's really striking. I think it's unfortunate Sheila did that comparison to slavery because, as you know, Planned Parenthood, when they actively advocated for abortions, one of the reasons Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, advocated for abortions because she said it would be a good thing to abort more African-American children. Horrible, eugenic, racist justifications, and that was much of the foundation behind Planned Parenthood being formed.
Senator, I want to get to an exchange now between our own Peter Doocy and the man you've called the most dangerous bureaucrat in American history.
As you advised the president about the possibility of new testing requirements for people coming into this country, does that include everybody?
The answer is yes. Anybody and everybody who's coming into the country needs to get a test within 24 hours of getting on the plane to come here.
Well, what about people who don't take a plane and just these border crossers coming in huge numbers?
You know, that's a different issue.
Senator, in other words, what Biden's doing has nothing to do with actually controlling the virus at all.
Look, the hypocrisy from Anthony Fauci seems to know no limits. You know, the damage he's done. In a time of a medical crisis, we would like the leadership at our health agencies to actually be based on science, to be based on medicine. And Fauci has demonstrated that he is just a Democratic talking head. He will go with the politics and he will change on a flip of a dime. I mean, you look at his answer there where he says, well, gosh, 2 million illegal immigrants coming across, not testing them, releasing them COVID positive. That's no risk whatsoever. On the other hand, when the teachers' unions ask the Biden administration to require kids to wear masks in schools, giving in to the teachers' unions because they're political allies of the Democrats, that's science too. And there's a level of just dishonesty that I think has done real damage to the credibility of the CDC and of the NIH. And I got to say, Dr. Fauci in particular, there are very serious questions about whether he committed a felony in lying to Congress, where he stated categorically that the NIH had not funded gain-of-function research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
Totally lied about it. Totally lied about it.
The NIH has contradicted that in writing.
Well,
and by the way, not only that, you know, Fauci communicated with Mark Zuckerberg in emails asking Facebook to censor anyone suggesting the virus came from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. That's not science either. That's politics and it's dishonesty, and he's done enormous damage.
He's a political hack, and sorry, but you know, his time has come and gone. The expiration date on Fauci has long since passed. Senator Cruz, great to have you on the court tonight.